Hi, today we're joined by Heidi Bragg, a pharmacist with extensive experience in the state of Texas. So, Heidi, thanks for joining us on Stop, Start, Continue. Could you give us a little bit of your background and kind of where you spent your career in pharmacy?
Sure, I've been a pharmacist for 30 years, but the majority of that has been in a regulatory practice.
Okay,
So, for a period of time, I worked for the Texas State Board of Pharmacy and did inspections. And then for quite a few years, almost 10 years, I worked for a Fortune 20 corporation and was their director for regulatory management. So I became very familiar with dealing with federal agencies and
okay.
also dealing with 42 different state boards of pharmacy.
Oh, that sounds lovely and untangled for sure.
Yes,
Well,
exactly.
great. So, based on that experience and seeing so many different sides of the practice of pharmacy, what's something that you feel like we need to stop doing, to move the practice forward and make it a better?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So, my current role, I work in preventing drug diversion in a
Okay.
children's hospital.
Okay.
And one of the things I've really come to realize is when we think about diversion, many pharmacists and pharmacies are
Mhm.
more concerned about, hey, we want to avoid penalties from the DEA.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
I've got a new perspective on preventing drug diversion, and that is it's really about patient safety.
Okay.
And then after patient safety, it's about employee safety.
Sure.
And the reason I say that is if we have a patient in the hospital, we do not want an impaired healthcare worker taking care of them.
Oh
So,
gosh,
yeah, that's kind of an ominous thought.
that's probably not something many of the people listening and watching or I have ever thought about. So, can you kind of dive into that a little deeper?
Sure. I think that we need to be realistic how stressful the healthcare industry is. We
Okay.
put people under extraordinary amounts of stress, particularly during the pandemic and even
Yeah.
since the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then we give them access to very powerful drugs. And for a certain population, that could be tempting because there's the relief from that anxiety or stress.
Okay.
And, some people might turn to alcohol, but other people may be more prone to try pharmaceuticals.
Right. And especially if they have daily access to those pharmaceuticals, I'm sure it's a tempting, salve to put on the stress, right? I hadn't thought about, the high levels of stress that we put in a normal situation that during COVID. You're right, the stressors went through the roof.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what's something we need to start doing, right? So, if we're going to stop looking at this as just and let's not, get run afoul of the regulatory agencies and start thinking about employees and patient safety. What's something we need to start doing to help that?
One of the things that I think is so important is we need to stop looking at this as an unexpected outcome. We need to
Okay.
be realistic that we put people in a position where they're in contact with these drugs. We
Hmm.
know that 10 to 15% of people in their lifetime will abuse drugs or
Wow.
alcohol.
Wow.
And so we have to be realistic that we're crunching down and putting all the pressure on them at work that there's going to be the potential for having diversion. And
Okay.
we want to do what we can to prevent diversion. In other words, we monitor reports, we keep on top of all of the um, drugs coming in and drugs being administered. I'm
Okay.
not saying keep that up, but I think that we need to be better about not just throwing that employee away
Okay.
and sending them on to the next place to divert. Because basically, you're just pushing that problem on to a new set of patients.
Wow. And you're right. So it's you really start treating this as a kind of the disease and really looking at the how do we help our healthcare workers, because it
Mhm.
was great to see during COVID period of so much respect and support for the folks on the front lines of healthcare, but now thinking about what they're going through and how they're dealing with it and how they're medicating, whether it's with drugs or alcohol, is really
Mhm.
something that really it's a good way to start thinking about it, the problem in a new light, right? So
Right.
is there
I just think sometimes it's very complicated and very challenging for health systems
mhm.
because they don't want to get a bad reputation. That's
Sure,
understandable.
right, yeah,
But um, if you have an environment where people are afraid to report that their colleague or themselves have a problem, it's going to stay hidden. So I actually love that I work in a facility that we definitely encourage everyone to report. And just because someone tests positive for drugs doesn't mean they're going to get fired.
wow,
Um,
okay,
so, you know, isn't it really our responsibility to also take care of that employee, make sure they get the help that they need, and
right,
also to help them get back into the workforce? Maybe they can't work around those drugs again. But
right.
there's certainly jobs in a hospital where people don't have access to drugs,
Oh, for
even
sure.
as you're a nurse.
No, right, absolutely. Yeah, there are plenty of nurses and leadership positions and physicians and everyone from the folks in the food workers all the way up through management, right? I mean, they all can have access to these medications at some point. So treating them as the people that they are, and not throwing
Mhm.
out the healthcare worker with the bathwater, if it was, right? So that's interesting to see that, because there's so much still to give, and I think we can help people become more effective at managing whatever processes and issues that they've got to deal with internally. So thinking about that and thinking about how we've and I'm glad to hear that the facility you're at has a more kind of a thoughtful approach to it, right? And in that rehabbing and bringing folks back in is something they focus on. What else is something that right now we're doing that we should continue to do that is on the right path? Whether it's the acknowledging what we should be doing and how we should be aspiring to a better way to handle these issues.
Yeah, and so that does kind of feed into still complying with all of those regulations. So we need to keep educating people.
Okay.
A lot of people don't realize that basically the DEA says, hey, you should be educating your personnel on how to report a diversion if they know that something's happening.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't report simply because they don't even sometimes recognize that it's diversion, or
Right.
more importantly, they know something's wrong, but they don't know who to tell.
Oh,
So we want to make sure we put that information out there regularly,
sure.
and just having it be a common thing so that any healthcare worker in your facility knows, hey, if I see something that doesn't look right with drugs, I can call the compliance hotline, I
Right.
can call the drug diversion prevention team, or I could report it to my supervisor, and it will be taken care of. It'll be taken seriously,
Right.
and will also be handled with fairness. And that is one of the things is, you want to make sure that you're looking at all of those possibilities, because
Right.
it might not actually be diversion, it might be something different. And we want to make sure that we don't
You don't want to leap to the
label
wrong
someone as
conclusion.
a murderer if there's not proof of that.
Sure, that makes sense, right? Yeah, I mean, looking at it holistically and really diving in, I'm sure that prevents a lot of people from, kind of speaking up, right? Because it's like, I don't know and
I don't know.
what's going to happen if are they going to get fired? Are they going to implicate me? Am I going to be right? I mean, and so I think it's important too in that of having your frontline supervisors and management as they go up, understanding that it's not the knee jerk reaction can't be you're fired, right? It's like let's bring in the experts, like yourself, to take an investigative approach to this and find out what's really happening, because it could be something that, like you said, I don't know what it would be. That's not my area of expertise, but it could be something completely benign, right? And so it's something we
Right.
need to really focus on. So that's one. I mean, anything else to add on that? I mean, I'm glad to hear that there's some efforts underway to treat this problem with a little bit more of the humanness, the human kindness, right? That it's deserving of.
Absolutely. And um, I think one of the things that my partner and I really at work really focus on is we want to keep people from getting to the point where they're taking drugs from work and jeopardizing patients.
Right.
Um, and some of that now is very motivated by what the agencies are doing. And a lot of people don't realize, but if you go and Google and look up some recent nurses who've been arrested, the FDA, if those nurses were tampering with the drugs to steal them,
Okay.
they are finding those nurses and they're sending them to jail.
Wow.
Personally,
Wow.
don't think that that's the right route to take necessarily, but nurses are uh, very vulnerable right now.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I
Oh,
would say.
it's incredible, and thank God that they're there, right? I mean, they're really
Absolutely.
taking care of us, and they really are truly the front lines, and with
Mhm.
with the physician teams and the pharmacists and everyone else in the hospital facilities, responsible for taking care of that patient and making sure that they get to go home, right, and that their therapy is intact and that they're feeling better and are better. So,
Right.
I appreciate you sharing that perspective with us today. And obviously with your background and your expertise, it's really great to catch up with you again. And anything else to share with the audience before we leave?
No, just always be vigilant
Yep.
and keeping an eye on everything. The best thing you can do is keep good relationships with all of those departments, and
Yep.
then they'll feel comfortable coming to tell you what's going on.
Absolutely. You've done that throughout your whole career, so you know what you're talking about. So thank you, Heidi, so much for joining us today. I
Thank
hope the
you.
audience has enjoyed this. Thank you.